Bear cub was caught in a stampede of rampaging elephants. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning sun painted the African savannah in shades of gold and amber. Dust particles danced in the warm air as gentle breezes carried the scent of wild grass across the endless plains. In a small village nestled between acacia trees, life moved at its usual peaceful pace. Kira sat on the wooden steps of her family's hut, watching her 18-month-old daughter Zara play with colorful stones in the dirt. The baby's laughter filled the quiet morning as she stacked the stones into wobbly towers, only to knock them down with delighted squeals. Kira smiled, her heart swelling with the simple joy of motherhood. "Mama, look," Zara babbled in her baby language, holding up a particularly shiny stone. "Very pretty, my little one," Kira whispered, reaching over to stroke her daughter's soft curls. Beyond the village, where the grassland stretched toward distant hills, something stirred in the thick bushes. A small brown bear cub, no bigger than a house cat, pushed through the thorny branches. His name was Biko, and he had wandered far from his mother's den in search of sweet berries. His tiny paws padded silently through the tall grass as he sniffed the air, following a trail of fascinating scents. Biko had never seen humans before. His world consisted of his mother's warm fur, the safety of their hidden den, and the taste of fresh honey from wild beehives. But today, curiosity had pulled him further than ever before. His small black eyes sparkled with wonder as he spotted the strange wooden structures in the distance. Meanwhile, Kira stood up and brushed the dust from her colorful wrap. "I need to fetch water from the well, little Zara. You stay right here and play with your stones." Zara nodded seriously, as if she understood every word. She continued her important work of stone stacking while her mother walked toward the village center, her footsteps fading into the distance. The baby sat alone, but she wasn't afraid. This was her world, her safe place where nothing bad ever happened. She hummed a tuneless song while arranging her stones in new patterns, completely unaware that something extraordinary was about to unfold. In the distance, a low rumbling sound began to emerge from the far hills. It was so quiet at first that it seemed like thunder from a storm that might never come. But the sound grew steadily stronger, accompanied by something else: the panicked trumpet calls of elephants. Biko, still hidden in the grass, lifted his small head. His keen hearing caught the distant noise before any human could notice it. Something was wrong. Very wrong. His mother had taught him to recognize the sounds of danger, and these trumpeting calls meant only one thing: the great gray giants were running from something terrible. The baby, Zara, looked up from her stones as a strange vibration seemed to come from the ground itself. She placed her tiny palm flat against the earth and felt it trembling, like a heartbeat that was much too fast. Her innocent eyes grew wide with confusion, but not fear. She was too young to understand what danger meant. As the rumbling grew louder, birds began to scatter from their perches in the acacia trees. Small animals that had been grazing peacefully suddenly lifted their heads and bounded away toward safety. The very air seemed to buzz with an energy that spoke of approaching chaos. Biko crept closer to the village, drawn by an instinct he couldn't name. Through the grass, he could see the small human sitting alone, her bright clothing making her visible even from a distance. Something deep in his young heart stirred, a feeling he had never experienced before. The baby, Zara, stood up on unsteady legs, still clutching a smooth stone in her fist. The rumbling was getting louder now, and she could hear what sounded like thunder mixed with the calls of animals she had never heard before. She took a few wobbly steps toward the edge of the hut's small porch. trying to see where the strange sounds were coming from. From her new position, she spotted something moving in the tall grass, a small brown shape that seemed to be struggling through the thick stems. Her baby brain couldn't identify what it was, but her heart recognized something important. Another small creature, just like her, who seemed to need help. The ground shook more violently now. Dust began to rise on the horizon, creating a brown cloud that grew larger with each passing moment. And through that cloud, the dark shapes of massive elephants began to emerge, their enormous bodies moving faster than anything so large should be able to move. Biko saw them too. His small body froze with terror as he realized he was directly in the path of the approaching stampede. His mother's warnings echoed in his mind, but his tiny legs seemed unable to move. The grass around him swayed violently as the earth shook beneath the weight of dozens of panicked elephants. Baby Zara dropped her stone and pointed toward the grass where Biko was hiding. She made soft cooing sounds, as if trying to call to whatever was hidden there. Her innocent voice carried across the savannah, a gentle sound that seemed impossibly fragile against the growing chaos. The stampede was getting closer. The lead elephant, a massive bull with ivory tusks, charged forward with wild eyes. Behind him came the rest of the herd, mothers protecting their young, elderly elephants struggling to keep pace, and confused adolescents following the crowd without understanding why they were running. What had started their panic remained a mystery, but their fear was real and dangerous. Nothing would stop them now except exhaustion or an obstacle too large to overcome. And directly in their path sat a tiny human baby who couldn't possibly understand the mortal danger racing toward her. The truth behind the stampede was darker than anyone could imagine. Miles away, hidden in a camouflaged vehicle, 3 poachers had been tracking this particular herd for weeks. Their leader, a scarred man named Rashid, had fired warning shots into the air to scatter the elephants toward a narrow canyon where his partners waited with tranquilizer guns. But something had gone wrong with their plan. "They're heading the wrong way," shouted Marcus, the youngest of the group, his voice crackling through the radio. "They're going straight toward the village." Rashid cursed under his breath. The elephants were supposed to run east toward the canyon, not south toward human settlements. Now, dozens of innocent lives were in danger because of their greed for ivory. But Rashid was a man who cared only about profit, not consequences. Back at the village, baby Zara took another unsteady step toward the grass where she had seen movement. Her curiosity was stronger than any fear her young mind could comprehend. She made soft clicking sounds with her tongue, the same noises she used when trying to communicate with the village chickens. "Here, little thing," she babbled in her baby language, extending her tiny hand toward the swaying grass. "Come play with Zara." Biko heard her gentle voice and felt something extraordinary happen in his small heart. No creature had ever spoken to him with such kindness except his mother. The human baby's voice was like music, cutting through his terror and filling him with an impossible sense of safety. He took a trembling step toward her voice, then another. His fear of the approaching stampede battled with his growing trust in this strange, small human. Slowly, his brown snout emerged from the grass, followed by his round black eyes and fuzzy ears. Zara gasped with delight when she saw his face. She had never seen a bear before, but to her innocent eyes, Biko looked like the most wonderful toy that had ever come to life. She clapped her hands together and giggled, a sound so pure and joyful that it seemed to create a bubble of peace around them both. "Puppy!" she exclaimed, using the only word she knew for 4-legged animals. Biko stepped fully out of the grass, his small body trembling with both fear and wonder. He was barely larger than Zara herself, his brown fur soft and clean from his mother's careful grooming. His dark eyes met the baby's bright ones, and something magical passed between them, a recognition that transcended species. The ground shook more violently now. Dust clouds rose higher on the horizon, and the trumpet calls of the elephants grew so loud they echoed off the nearby hills. Other villagers began to notice the commotion. Doors opened cautiously as people peered out to see what was causing such a disturbance. Old Mama Django, the village elder, stepped onto her porch and shaded her eyes with a weathered hand. Her sharp gaze immediately spotted the dust cloud, and her face went pale with recognition. "Elephants," she whispered, then louder, "Elephants! Everyone inside. Where are the children?" But her warning came too late for some. Several village children were playing near the well where Kira had gone to fetch water. A group of women were hanging laundry on lines between the huts, and sitting alone on her family's porch was little Zara, now face to face with a wild bear cub, while a stampede of massive elephants thundered toward them. Biko crept closer to Zara, drawn by her gentle smile and outstretched hands. He had never felt such kindness from any living creature except his mother. When Zara's tiny fingers touched his soft fur, he nearly jumped from surprise, but her touch was so gentle that he immediately relaxed. "Soft puppy," Zara cooed, running her small hands over his fuzzy ears. "Pretty puppy." For a moment, the chaos of the approaching stampede seemed to fade away. There was only a baby and a bear cub, two innocent souls connecting in a way that defied all logic and expectation. Biko pressed against Zara's side, seeking comfort in her warmth, while she giggled and tried to hug his small body. But their peaceful moment was shattered when the first elephant burst through a line of acacia trees at the village's edge. The massive bull was even larger up close, his tusks gleaming white in the morning sun, his eyes wild with panic and rage. Behind him came more elephants, mothers, children, elderly matriarchs, all running as if their lives depended on it. The ground shook so violently that Zara lost her balance and sat down hard, still clutching Biko against her chest. The bear cub whimpered with fear, but strangely he felt safer in the baby's arms than he had felt anywhere else since leaving his mother's den. Villagers began screaming and running in all directions. Mama Django shouted orders that no one could hear over the thundering of elephant feet. Women grabbed their children and fled toward the strongest huts. Men rushed to secure their animals and protect their homes. But in all the chaos, no one noticed the tiny drama unfolding on one small porch. A human baby holding a bear cub while certain death charged straight toward them. Kira, at the village well, heard the commotion and dropped her water bucket. Her heart stopped as she realized what was happening. Elephants were heading straight for the village, and her baby was alone at their hut. "Zara!" she screamed, lifting her skirts and running as fast as her legs could carry her. But she was too far away, and the elephants were too close. The lead bull elephant was now only 100 yards from Zara's hut. His massive feet crushed everything in his path. Small shrubs, wooden fences, clay pots left outside to dry. Nothing could stop his momentum now. Zara looked up at the approaching giant with wonder rather than fear. To her innocent eyes, the elephant looked like the biggest, most amazing animal she had ever seen. She had no concept that it could hurt her. Instead, she smiled and waved her free hand at the charging bull, still clutching Biko protectively with her other arm. "Big doggy," she called out happily, her voice somehow carrying over the thunderous noise. And then something impossible happened. The lead elephant, hearing that tiny voice, actually slowed his charge. His wild eyes focused on the small figure sitting on the porch, and for just a moment confusion replaced panic in his ancient mind. Biko felt the change in the air. His animal instincts told him that something had shifted in the elephant's behavior. The great beast was no longer charging blindly forward. He was looking, thinking, processing what he saw. Behind the bull, the rest of the herd began to slow as well, confused by their leader's sudden change in direction. The stampede that had seemed unstoppable just moments before began to break apart, as individual elephants tried to understand why they were no longer following their leader. Zara giggled again and held Biko up toward the elephant as if showing off her new friend. "Look, big doggy, Zara has puppy." The elephant bull stopped completely now, his massive head tilted to one side as he studied the strange scene before him. In all his years roaming the savannah, he had never encountered anything quite like this. A human baby, completely unafraid, introducing him to a bear cub, as if they were all old friends meeting at a tea party. The silence that fell over the village was almost more frightening than the noise had been. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Would the elephant crush the baby and continue his rampage? Would more elephants surge forward to complete their stampede? Or was something else entirely about to unfold? Mama Django, watching from her doorway, found herself praying to ancestors she hadn't spoken to in years. She had seen many strange things in her long life, but nothing had prepared her for the sight of her village's youngest resident calmly introducing a wild bear to a bull elephant, as if such meetings happened every day. The poachers, still hidden in their distant vehicle, watched through binoculars as their carefully planned stampede ground to a halt. Rashid pounded his fist against the dashboard in frustration. "What's happening? Why did they stop?" Marcus demanded. Through his binoculars, Rashid could see the elephants milling around in confusion near the village, but he couldn't make out the details of what had caused their leader to halt his charge. All he knew was that his plan was falling apart, and every minute of delay made their illegal operation more dangerous. "We need to get those elephants moving again," Rashid growled. "Fire another warning shot." But Marcus hesitated, his finger hovering over the trigger. Something in his gut told him that firing more shots now might cause a disaster that would haunt him forever. He had signed up to poach elephants for money, not to massacre innocent villagers. Back at the village, Zara stood up on shaky legs, still holding Biko in her arms. The bear cub was heavier than she was used to carrying, but her determination to protect her new friend gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. She took a few wobbling steps toward the elephant, completely oblivious to the gasps of horror from the villagers who could see her movement. To Zara, the big animal looked sad and confused, and her baby heart wanted to help him feel better. "Nice doggy," she said softly, reaching out her free hand toward the elephant's massive trunk. Zara help. The elephant bull, whose name in the ancient elephant language meant Thunderwalker, had lived for over 40 years. He had survived droughts, lions, and human hunters. He had led his herd through countless dangers and had learned to trust no one outside his own family. But something about this tiny human's fearless kindness touched a part of his heart that he had forgotten existed. Her voice reminded him of the elephant calves he had helped raise, the same innocent trust, the same pure love that asked for nothing in return. Slowly, carefully, Thunderwalker lowered his massive trunk toward Zara's outstretched hand. The other elephants watched in amazement as their fierce leader, who had been ready to destroy everything in his path just moments before, gently touched the baby's palm with the tip of his trunk. Zara giggled with delight at the feeling of the elephant's rough, warm skin against her hand. "Tickles," she announced to the world, as if sharing the most important news anyone could imagine. Biko, still safe in her arms, watched this incredible interaction with wonder. His small animal brain couldn't fully process what was happening, but he felt the change in the air around them. The danger was passing, replaced by something he had never experienced before, the magic of different species choosing friendship over fear. Thunderwalker made a soft rumbling sound deep in his chest, a greeting that elephants used with their most beloved family members. Other elephants in the herd began to approach cautiously, drawn by their leader's calm behavior and curious about the small human who had somehow stopped their stampede with nothing but kindness. Kira finally reached the edge of the gathering crowd of the villagers, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. When she saw her daughter standing peacefully among a herd of elephants, holding a bear cub and chatting happily with a massive bull, she almost fainted from shock. "Someone needs to get her away from there," whispered Mama Django. But even as she spoke, she knew that any sudden movement might shatter the fragile peace that had settled over the scene. The truth was becoming clear to everyone watching. Little Zara had somehow accomplished what no adult could have managed. She had stopped a stampede not with weapons or barriers, but with the simple power of innocent love and acceptance. But their moment of peace was about to be shattered by an unexpected arrival. From deep in the forest, a low growling sound began to echo through the trees. It was different from the elephant calls, deeper, more primal, filled with a mother's desperate fury. Biko's tiny body tensed in Zara's arms. He knew that sound better than any other in the world. His mother, Casey, had discovered his absence from their den and had been tracking his scent across miles of dangerous terrain. The great she-bear was massive compared to her cub, standing nearly 7 feet tall when upright, with claws that could tear through tree bark like paper. Casey had been hunting for fish in a distant stream when she returned to find her den empty. The panic that seized her heart was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Biko was her first and only cub, born late in her life when she had almost given up hope of motherhood. Every instinct in her powerful body screamed that her baby was in mortal danger. Following his scent trail, she had tracked him through thick underbrush, across rocky streams, and over hills that left her panting with exhaustion. But a mother's love gave her strength beyond her normal limits. Nothing would stop her from reaching her cub. Not distance, not danger, not even a herd of elephants. The villagers heard the approaching growls and felt a new wave of terror wash over them. If a baby and a bear cub had managed to calm the elephants, what would happen when an enraged mother bear arrived on the scene? "Dear spirits, protect us all," whispered Mama Django, clutching her prayer beads tightly. Thunderwalker heard the bear's approach as well. His enormous ears flapped nervously as he processed this new threat. Bears and elephants rarely encountered each other in the wild, but when they did, the meetings were usually violent. A mother bear protecting her young was one of the most dangerous animals in all of Africa. Zara, still oblivious to the growing tension, continued to pet Biko's soft fur while chatting happily with Thunderwalker. The elephant had lowered his great head until it was level with the baby, and she was now patting his wrinkled forehead with her free hand. "Big Doggy has wrinkles like Grandmama," she announced cheerfully, tracing the deep lines in the elephant's skin. But Biko was no longer paying attention to the baby's gentle touches. His small body trembled as his mother's scent reached him on the wind. He knew she would be angry about his adventure, but more than that, he was terrified of what might happen when she saw him surrounded by elephants and humans. The sound of breaking branches grew louder as Casey crashed through the forest at the village's edge. Birds scattered from the trees in panic, and small animals fled in all directions. Even the elephants began to shift nervously, sensing the approach of another large predator. Then she appeared. Casey burst from the tree line like a force of nature, her massive brown form moving with surprising speed despite her size. Her fur was matted with burrs and scratches from her desperate journey, and her dark eyes blazed with protective fury. When she saw her tiny cub in the arms of a human baby, surrounded by a herd of elephants, she let out a roar that shook the very ground. The sound was so terrifying that several villagers fainted on the spot. Even Thunderwalker took a step backward, his trunk raised defensively. The other elephants trumpeted in alarm and began to cluster together, their earlier calm completely shattered. But baby Zara, incredibly, was not afraid. She looked at the enormous bear with the same wonder and delight she had shown everything else that morning. To her innocent eyes, Cassie was simply Biko's mama, come to join their wonderful gathering of animal friends. "Mama puppy," Zara exclaimed joyfully, holding Biko higher as if presenting him to his mother. "Look, your baby." Casey stopped her charge abruptly, confused by the baby's reaction. She had expected screaming, running, fear, all the normal human responses to a charging bear. Instead, this tiny human was smiling at her and holding her cub with obvious love and gentleness. For a moment, mother and baby stared at each other across the dusty ground. Casey's rage began to waver as she saw that Biko was unharmed. More than unharmed, he seemed content and peaceful in the human baby's arms. But her maternal instincts were still screaming danger. Biko whimpered softly, torn between his new friendship with Zara and his desperate need to return to his mother's safety. He looked back and forth between them, his small heart breaking at the impossible choice. Zara, with the pure wisdom that only children possess, seemed to understand his dilemma. She kissed the top of his fuzzy head gently, then began walking slowly toward Casey, still carrying the cub in her arms. "Don't be scared, Mama Puppy," she said in her sweet baby voice. "Zara, take good care of baby." The villagers watched in horror as their youngest member walked directly toward a massive, angry bear. Some started forward to stop her, but Mama Django held up a weathered hand. "Wait," the old woman whispered. "The child has magic in her today. Let her work her spell." Cassie lowered herself to all fours as the baby approached, but her muscles remained tense, ready to attack if this human showed any sign of threat toward her cub. Her black eyes never left Zara's face, searching for any hint of deception or danger. When Zara was close enough to touch the great bear's nose, she stopped and slowly knelt down. With infinite care, she placed Biko on the ground between herself and his mother, then sat back on her heels with her hands in her lap. "Here, Mama Puppy," she said softly. "Your baby miss you." Biko immediately ran to his mother, pressing his small body against her massive chest. Cassie wrapped her huge paws around him, nuzzling his fur and checking every inch of his body for injuries. Her relief at finding him safe and healthy was so overwhelming that she began to make soft whimpering sounds, the same sounds of joy that human mothers make when reunited with their lost children. But even as she examined her cub, Casey kept one eye on the human baby who had been caring for him. There was something extraordinary about this small human, something that spoke to the deepest part of her maternal heart. She could smell no fear on the child, only love and kindness. Zara watched the reunion with pure joy, clapping her hands softly so as not to startle them. "Good Mama Puppy, love your baby so much." Thunder Walker, who had been watching this entire exchange with growing amazement, made a decision that would puzzle elephant researchers for generations to come. He approached the small group slowly, his massive form casting a shadow over them all, and gently touched Zara's shoulder with the tip of his trunk. The baby looked up at him with her bright smile. "Big doggy want to meet Mama Puppy?" What happened next defied every law of animal behavior that scientists had ever documented. Thunderwalker lowered his head toward Casey in the elephant gesture of respectful greeting. The great bear, still holding her cub protectively, looked up at the enormous elephant and, incredibly, touched his trunk with her nose, the bear equivalent of a friendly hello. For a moment, baby, bear cub, mother bear, and bull elephant formed a circle of impossible harmony. The other elephants began to approach cautiously, drawn by their leader's calm acceptance. The villagers watched in stunned silence as their world transformed into something magical. But the spell was broken by the distant crack of a gunshot. The poachers had grown impatient with their failed plan. Rashid had decided that if he couldn't drive the elephants into his trap, he would simply take what he could get from the confused herd gathered near the village. His greed had overcome his caution, and he had ordered Marcus to fire a shot to scatter the animals and create chaos. The gunshot sent shockwaves through the peaceful gathering. The elephants immediately began trumpeting in alarm, their earlier panic returning in full force. Thunderwalker swung his massive head around, searching for the source of the threat that his ancient instincts knew meant death. Kessie roared again, this time not in anger, but in warning. She snatched Biko up in her mouth by the scruff of his neck and began backing toward the forest, her protective instincts overriding the strange peace she had found with the human baby. Zara, finally frightened by the loud noise and the sudden agitation of her new friends, began to cry. Her wails mixed with the elephant trumpeting and bear roars to create a cacophony of distress that echoed across the savannah. The villagers could see dust clouds approaching from the east, vehicles moving fast across the grassland. Some of the men recognized the signs immediately. "Poachers," growled Django's son, Kwame, a ranger who had fought such men before. "They've been driving the elephants toward us." The realization hit everyone at once. The stampede hadn't been a natural panic. It had been deliberately caused by ivory hunters who cared nothing for human or animal lives. The peaceful village had become a battleground between greed and innocence. Thunderwalker made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of fleeing with his herd, he positioned his massive body between the approaching vehicles and the baby who had shown him such kindness. His trumpet call was different this time, not panic but defiance. He was declaring his intention to protect the small human who had touched his ancient heart. Other elephants began to follow his lead. The matriarch of the herd, an old female named Amara, who had survived many encounters with poachers, trumpeted her own challenge. One by one, the elephants formed a protective circle around the village, with little Zara at its center. Kessie, seeing the elephant's protective stance, made her own choice. Instead of fleeing to the forest with Biko, she set him down gently and positioned herself next to Thunderwalker. For the first time in natural history, bears and elephants prepared to fight side by side. The approaching vehicles were close enough now that the villagers could hear their engines roaring across the grassland. There were 3 trucks filled with armed men, racing toward what they thought would be easy prey. Rashid, leading the convoy, saw the elephants' defensive formation and smiled grimly. "Perfect," he radioed to his men. "They've grouped themselves for us. We'll take the big bull first, then work our way through the herd." But as his truck crested a small hill and the village came into full view, Rashid saw something that made his blood run cold. Standing in the center of the elephant circle was a human baby, calm and unafraid, with a massive bull elephant's trunk resting protectively on her shoulder. "Boss," Marcus's voice crackled over the radio, "there's a child down there, a baby." Rashid's scarred face hardened. He had killed many animals for profit, but he had never directly caused the death of a human child. Even his criminal heart had limits. "So what?" he snarled into the radio, but his hands trembled on the steering wheel. "Animals panic, accidents happen. Not our fault if locals are stupid enough to leave babies around elephants." Marcus, watching through binoculars from the second truck, saw something that Rashid had missed. The baby wasn't cowering in fear. She was standing calmly, surrounded by animals that seemed to be protecting her rather than threatening her. "Boss, I don't think this is normal elephant behavior. Something's different here." The third truck, driven by a man named Joao, who had joined the poaching operation only for the money, began to slow down. Through his windshield, he could see village men emerging from their huts, carrying whatever weapons they could find. Hunting spears, farming tools, old rifles passed down from colonial times. "We've got company," Joao warned over the radio. "The whole village is coming out to fight." But it wasn't the human defenders that made Joao's hands shake on the steering wheel. It was the sight of a massive mother bear standing shoulder to shoulder with the elephant bull, both of them focused on protecting the same small human child. In all his years of illegal hunting, Joao had never seen anything like it. Natural enemies had become allies, united by something more powerful than instinct or territory, the need to protect innocence itself. The convoy of poacher trucks roared closer, but their earlier confidence was beginning to crack. What had seemed like a simple robbery was turning into something much more complicated and dangerous. Baby Zara, still standing in the center of the protective circle, had stopped crying. She looked around at all her new friends, the gentle giant Thunder Walker, the fierce but loving Mama Bear Casey, the little cub Biko who had started it all, and she smiled through her tears. "Good doggies," she whispered, her tiny voice somehow carrying across the savannah wind. "Protect Zara." And they would. No matter what came next, this unlikely family had found each other, and they would not be separated without a fight that would become legend in the villages for generations to come. The stage was set for a confrontation between pure greed and pure love, with a baby's innocent heart as the prize that would determine the outcome of everything. But as the poacher trucks roared across the final stretch of grassland toward the village, an unexpected complication emerged from the morning shadows. A fourth vehicle appeared on the horizon, this one different from the others. It was white with official government markings, and it was moving fast to intercept the poachers' convoy. Inside the government vehicle, Wildlife Conservation Officer Sarah Mwangi gripped her radio tightly as she spoke to her headquarters. She had been tracking this particular poaching ring for months, following their movements across 3 different territories. Today was supposed to be the day they finally caught Rashid and his crew in the act. "Control, this is Unit 7. I have visual contact with the poaching convoy. They're heading directly toward Katemba village. There are civilians in immediate danger." The crackling voice of her supervisor came back through static. "Unit 7, maintain distance and wait for backup. Do not engage alone." Sarah's jaw tightened as she watched the scene unfolding before her through binoculars. She could see the elephants formed in their protective circle, the villagers gathering with makeshift weapons, and in the center of it all, a small child who seemed to be the focus of everyone's attention. "Negative control, there's a baby down there, and those poachers are about to start shooting. I'm going in." She clicked off the radio before her supervisor could order her to stand down. Sarah had joined the Wildlife Service because she believed in protecting both animals and people. Today, both were in danger, and she was the only law enforcement officer close enough to help. Meanwhile, in the lead poacher truck, Rashid was having his own crisis of conscience, though his was motivated more by self-preservation than morality. The sight of the organized animal defense and armed villagers made him realize this operation had spiraled far beyond his control. "This is insane," he muttered to himself, watching Thunderwalker's massive form through his dusty windshield. "Elephants don't behave like this. Bears don't fight alongside elephants. What kind of witchcraft is happening here?" His radio crackled with Marcus's nervous voice. "Boss, maybe we should abort. This doesn't feel right. There's something supernatural about this whole situation." Rashid's greed warred with his survival instincts. The ivory from just one of those elephant tusks would feed his family for a year, but the scene before him looked like something from an ancient legend, Animals and humans united against a common threat, with a child at the center of it all, like some kind of mystical guardian. In the village, Kira had finally broken free from the crowd of villagers and was running toward her daughter. Her heart pounded with terror as she saw Zara standing calmly among the massive animals, apparently unaware of the approaching danger. "Zara!" she screamed, but her voice was lost in the trumpeting of elephants and the roar of approaching engines. Mama Django caught Kira's arm as she tried to rush into the circle of animals. "Wait, child. Look with your eyes, not your fear. Your daughter is safer there than anywhere else right now." And it was true. Thunderwalker had positioned himself like a living fortress around Zara, his tusks facing outward toward the threat. Kessie stood beside him, her claws extended, every muscle in her powerful body ready for battle. Even little Biko had positioned himself between Zara and danger, his small form trembling but determined. The other elephants had formed concentric circles around their leader, creating layers of protection that would be nearly impossible to penetrate. The matriarch, Amara, trumpeted commands to her herd, organizing them with the precision of a military unit. But the most remarkable sight was Zara herself. The baby had climbed onto Thunderwalker's massive foot and was now sitting cross-legged, patting his ankle reassuringly while she watched the approaching trucks with curious interest rather than fear. "Big doggy's coming fast," she observed to Thunderwalker, as if commenting on the weather. "They look angry." Thunderwalker's response was a low rumble that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. It was a sound that elephants made when preparing for war, a call that hadn't been heard in these parts for generations. The first truck was now close enough that the villagers could see Rashid's scarred face through the windshield. He was steering directly toward the elephant formation, apparently planning to scatter them with the vehicle's momentum and noise. But Sarah Mwangi had other plans. Her government vehicle came roaring in from the side, kicking up a cloud of dust as she positioned herself between the poachers and the village. She leaped out with her rifle ready, her official uniform clearly visible to everyone present. "Wildlife Conservation Service," she shouted through a megaphone. "Stop your vehicles immediately. You are under arrest for illegal poaching activities." Rashid cursed violently and slammed on his brakes, his truck skidding to a stop just 50 yards from the elephant circle. His two companions pulled up beside him, their engines still running as they waited for orders. "One ranger," Rashid snarled into his radio. "Just one woman. We can handle this." But Marcus was studying the scene more carefully through his binoculars, and what he saw made his blood run cold. "Boss, she's not alone. Look at the elephants. Look at that bear. They're all watching us like they're waiting for a signal to attack." It was true. Every animal in the protective formation had turned to face the poachers' trucks. Their stillness was more menacing than any charge would have been. They were no longer panicked creatures running from danger. They had become a coordinated army defending their territory. Sarah positioned herself behind her vehicle, her rifle trained on Rashid's truck. She had dealt with armed poachers before, but never in a situation like this. The presence of the child complicated everything. One wrong move, one stray bullet, and an innocent life could be lost. "Rashid Mohammed," she called out, her voice carrying across the dusty ground. "I know who you are. You're wanted in 3 countries for ivory smuggling. Surrender now, and no one gets hurt." Rashid's eyes widened in shock. How did this ranger know his name? His operation was supposed to be secret, invisible to law enforcement. Someone had betrayed him, or worse, they had been under surveillance all along. In the third truck, João made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He turned off his engine, opened his door, and stepped out with his hands raised high above his head. "I surrender," he called out loudly. "I'm done with this madness." His defection sent shockwaves through the poaching team. Marcus looked back and forth between his surrendering partner and his increasingly desperate leader, torn between loyalty and self-preservation. "Coward!" Rashid screamed at Joao. "We can still salvage this operation." But Joao was already walking toward Sarah with his hands up, his face pale but determined. "I never signed up to hurt children," he said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This whole thing has gone too far." Baby Zara, watching this drama unfold from her perch on Thunder Walker's foot, clapped her hands with delight. To her innocent eyes, it looked like the angry men were finally learning to be nice, just like her mama had always taught her. "Good mans," she called out cheerfully. "No more angry, be friends." Her sweet voice carried across the battlefield, and for a moment, everyone, poachers, ranger, villagers, and animals, stopped what they were doing to look at her. There was something surreal about receiving a lesson in conflict resolution from a baby sitting on an elephant's foot while surrounded by the most unlikely alliance in natural history. Thunder Walker seemed to understand that the immediate threat was diminishing. His massive ears flapped once, and he made a gentle rumbling sound that other elephants recognized as a command to ease their defensive posture. The herd relaxed slightly, though they remained ready to fight if necessary. Kessie, however, was not convinced that the danger had passed. Her keen sense of smell detected something that the others had missed: the scent of fear, desperation, and violence that clung to Rashid like a poisonous cloud. Her hackles remained raised as she focused her dark eyes on the lead poacher's truck. Sarah began moving forward cautiously, her rifle still ready, but no longer directly aimed at the remaining poachers. "Marcus Chen, I know you're in there too. You have a wife and children in Nairobi. Think about them. Think about that baby over there. Is Ivory really worth destroying so many lives?" Marcus felt his resolve crumbling. Sarah was right. He did have a family. Children not much older than the baby he could see sitting so trustingly among the elephants. What would his own daughter think if she knew what her father did for money? His hands shook as he reached for his radio. "Boss, I think we should surrender. This isn't worth it anymore." But Rashid's response was not what anyone expected. Instead of surrendering or fleeing, he grabbed an automatic rifle from the seat beside him and kicked open his truck door. His face was twisted with rage and desperation as he realized his carefully planned operation was collapsing around him. "If I can't have those tusks," he snarled, "then nobody can." He raised his weapon, but instead of aiming at the elephants, he pointed it directly at baby Zara. His logic was twisted but clear. If he killed the child who seemed to be the center of this supernatural protection, maybe the animals would scatter and he could still salvage something from this disaster. The moment his rifle swung toward Zara, everything changed. Thunder Walker's response was instantaneous and terrifying. His trumpet call shattered the morning air with such force that windows cracked in the village huts. He took one massive step forward, his enormous foot coming down with earth-shaking impact, and lowered his head until his tusks were pointed directly at Rashid. Casey's roar joined the elephant's trumpet, a sound of pure maternal fury that made everyone's blood freeze. She rose up on her hind legs, revealing her full 7-foot height, her claws extended, and her massive jaw open to show teeth that could crush bones. Even the other elephants, who had been relatively calm moments before, began trumpeting in rage. The sound was deafening, primal, a warning that death was about to visit anyone who threatened their unlikely family. But the most chilling response came from an unexpected source. Little Biko, the bear cub who had started this entire chain of events, positioned himself directly between Rashid's rifle and baby Zara. His small body was no protection against bullets, but his gesture was clear. He was willing to die to protect the human baby who had shown him such kindness. Zara, still sitting on Thunderwalker's foot, looked at all the commotion with wide eyes. She didn't understand guns or danger, but she could feel the emotions of her animal friends. They were scared and angry, and that made her sad. "No be mad," she said in her baby voice, holding up her tiny hands toward Rashid, as if her gesture could stop bullets. "Zara love you too." Her innocent words hit Rashid like a physical blow. For just a moment his hardened criminal heart cracked open, and he saw what he had become. A man pointing a weapon at a baby who was offering him love even as he threatened her life. But that moment of humanity was brief. Greed and desperation won out over conscience, and his finger began to tighten on the trigger. That was when Marcus made the most important decision of his life. Instead of waiting to see what his boss would do, he threw open his truck door and tackled Rashid from behind, sending both men crashing to the ground as the rifle discharged harmlessly into the air. "I won't let you hurt that baby," Marcus shouted as he wrestled with his former leader. "I won't let you turn me into a child killer." The gunshot sent fresh waves of panic through the scene, but this time the panic was different. The animals weren't running away, they were preparing to attack. Every elephant in the herd began moving forward in formation, their combined weight making the ground shake like an earthquake. Sarah sprinted toward the wrestling poachers, trying to reach them before the elephants did. She knew that once Thunderwalker began his charge, nothing would stop him from crushing everyone in his path. But as she ran, she heard something that made her stumble in amazement. Baby Zara had begun to sing. It wasn't really a song, just the wordless humming that babies make when they're trying to comfort themselves or others. But her sweet, innocent voice somehow cut through all the chaos and reached every ear on that dusty battlefield. Thunderwalker stopped his charge mid-step, his massive head turning toward the sound. Kissy lowered herself back to all fours, still growling but no longer in attack position. Even the other elephants paused, their ancient hearts touched by the universal language of a child's lullaby. Zara continued her wordless song while she climbed down from Thunderwalker's foot. To everyone's amazement, she began walking toward the spot where Marcus and Rashid were still struggling on the ground. Her tiny legs carried her with purpose, as if she knew exactly what she needed to do. "Zara, no!" Kira screamed from the crowd of villagers, but Mama Django held her back once again. "The child has chosen her path," the old woman whispered. "We must trust in whatever spirit guides her." As Zara approached the fighting men, still humming her gentle song, something miraculous began to happen. The rage seemed to drain out of the conflict like water from a broken pot. Rashid stopped struggling and looked up at the baby with confused, wondering eyes. Marcus loosened his grip, though he kept the rifle safely out of reach. Zara knelt down beside them and placed one tiny hand on each man's face, her touch as gentle as butterfly wings. "No be sad," she whispered to Rashid, looking directly into his hardened eyes. "Zara, help make better." For the second time that morning, a hardened criminal found himself face to face with perfect innocence. But this time the innocence didn't just offer love, it offered redemption. Rashid began to cry. The tears came slowly at first, then in great heaving sobs that shook his entire body. He had not cried since childhood, had thought himself incapable of such emotion. But this baby's touch seemed to unlock every bit of pain, regret, and lost humanity he had buried deep inside his heart. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "God forgive me, I'm so sorry." Marcus, still pinning his former boss to the ground, found his own eyes filling with tears. The transformation he was witnessing seemed impossible, but he could feel it happening in his own heart as well. The baby's touch was like absolution, washing away guilt and shame he had carried for years. Sarah reached them just as this emotional crisis peaked. She had her handcuffs ready, and her authority as a law enforcement officer demanded that she arrest both men immediately. But what she saw made her pause. Two hardened criminals were crying like children, while a baby offered them comfort with the pure love that only innocents possess. Around them, a herd of elephants stood guard, not as jailers, but as protectors of this moment of transformation. "Please," Rashid whispered to Sarah, his face streaked with tears and dust. "Don't let me hurt anyone else. I've done terrible things, but I don't want to be this person anymore." Zara patted his cheek gently and smiled her radiant baby smile. "Good man now," she announced with absolute certainty. Zara Love Goodman. And somehow, everyone present knew that she was right. The spell of innocence had worked its ancient magic once again, turning enemies into protectors, criminals into penitents, and chaos into the strangest family reunion in the history of the African savannah. But their moment of peace was interrupted by a sound that made everyone's blood run cold. The distant whir of helicopter blades cutting through the morning air. Sarah immediately recognized the sound and grabbed her radio with trembling hands. "Control, this is Unit 7. Please tell me you sent backup in helicopters." The crackling response filled her with dread. "Negative, Unit 7. Our air support is still 30 minutes out. Those are not our birds." High above the savannah, two military helicopters approached the village at high speed. But these weren't government aircraft. They bore no official markings and flew with the aggressive formation of mercenaries on a mission. Inside the lead helicopter, a man with cold gray eyes studied the scene below through high-powered binoculars. His name was Victor Kozlov, and he was Rashid's boss, the man who financed poaching operations across 3 countries. Victor had been monitoring the radio communications of his ground team, and when he heard that his most profitable operation was falling apart, he had decided to take personal control of the situation. "Sir," his pilot called back through the headset, "we're approaching the target zone, but I'm seeing some very strange formations down there. Those elephants aren't scattered, they're organized like they're protecting something." Victor adjusted his binoculars and cursed in Russian when he saw the scene clearly. His 3-man poaching team was on the ground, apparently surrendering to a single wildlife officer. More importantly, a fortune in ivory was standing in defensive formation around what appeared to be a human settlement. "I didn't invest $500,000 in this operation to watch it fail because my men lost their nerve," Victor snarled into his headset. "Prepare the tranquilizer guns. We're taking those elephants one way or another." In the second helicopter, Victor's team of hired mercenaries checked their equipment. They were experienced in dealing with both animals and humans who got in the way of profitable operations. To them, this was just another job, and they had no intention of letting sentiment interfere with business. But they hadn't counted on the bond that had formed between the baby and her unlikely protectors. On the ground, Thunder Walker was the first to notice the approaching aircraft. His massive ears flapped in agitation as he recognized the sound of danger from above. Elephants had learned to fear helicopters over generations of encounters with poachers and government culling operations. His trumpet of warning brought immediate response from his herd. The elephants began to cluster even more tightly around Zara, creating a living fortress of gray flesh and protective instincts. But this time, their formation was different. They were looking up, preparing to defend against an aerial assault. Cassie heard the helicopters too, and her response was immediate and fierce. She reared up on her hind legs again, roaring her challenge to the sky itself. In her simple but powerful mind, anything that threatened her cub or the human baby who had brought them all together was an enemy that deserved death. Baby Zara, still kneeling between the reformed poachers, looked up at the approaching helicopters with curious interest rather than fear. To her innocent eyes, they looked like giant mechanical dragonflies, fascinating rather than frightening. "Big flies," she announced cheerfully, pointing at the aircraft. "Pretty flies go buzz-buzz." But her animal protectors knew better. Thunder Walker positioned himself directly over Zara like a living umbrella, his massive body ready to absorb any attack from above. The other elephants arranged themselves in overlapping layers, creating multiple barriers of protection. Sarah's mind raced as she tried to process this new threat. 2 helicopters full of unknown attackers, a reformed poaching team, a baby surrounded by protective animals, and a village full of innocent civilians. The situation was spiraling beyond anything her training had prepared her for. She grabbed her radio again. "Control, we have incoming helicopters, identity unknown. I need immediate air support and ground backup. We have civilians in danger, including a child." Unit 7. Air support is en route, but still 25 minutes out. You need to hold position and protect the civilians until help arrives. Sarah looked around at her resources. A crying former criminal, his reformed partner, one surrendered poacher, and herself. Against 2 helicopters full of armed mercenaries, they didn't stand a chance through conventional means. But then she looked at the elephant formation surrounding baby Zara, at the massive bear standing guard, at the villagers emerging from their huts with whatever weapons they could find. Maybe conventional warfare wasn't the answer here. In the lead helicopter, Victor was studying the defensive formation below with growing admiration and frustration. "Look at that organization," he muttered to his pilot. "I've never seen elephants behave like that. They're acting like a trained military unit." His pilot, a former Army aviator named Chen, nodded grimly. "Sir, there's something else. I'm detecting multiple heat signatures moving toward the village from all directions. It looks like other animal groups are converging on this location." Victor raised his binoculars again and felt a chill run down his spine. Chen was right. The surrounding savannah was alive with movement. Herds of zebras, groups of antelopes, packs of wild dogs, even individual leopards and cheetahs were all moving toward the village as if responding to some silent call. "What in God's name is happening down there?" Victor whispered. The truth was something that would have sounded like fantasy if anyone had tried to explain it. Baby Zara's innocent presence had created a ripple effect that was spreading across the entire ecosystem. Animals that had never cooperated before were putting aside their natural instincts to become part of something larger, a protective force centered on one small human child. Mama Django, watching from her doorway, felt ancient knowledge stirring in her memory. Her grandmother had told her stories of such events, times when the spirits of the land would choose a special child to represent the harmony between all living things. She had always thought they were just stories. "The prophecy," she whispered to herself, "the child who speaks the language of all creatures, who brings peace between natural enemies. It's really happening." But prophecies, as Mama Django knew from her grandmother's stories, came with a price. The forces of greed and destruction would always rise to challenge such harmony, and the battle between them would determine the fate of more than just one child. Victor's helicopters began their descent, preparing for the attack that would either secure his fortune or destroy everything he had worked to build. His tranquilizer guns were loaded and ready. His mercenaries were in position, and his greed had overcome any remaining traces of conscience. "Remember," he spoke into his headset to his team, We want those elephants alive but unconscious. The ivory is worthless if the animals are dead. We need them for the underground auction markets. And if any humans get in the way." He didn't finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear. Human lives were acceptable casualties in his pursuit of profit. As the helicopters dropped lower, their rotor wash began to kick up clouds of dust around the elephant formation. The animals became increasingly agitated, but they held their positions around Zara with unwavering determination. Thunderwalker trumpeted again, this time with a sound that carried across miles of savannah. It was a call that elephants used only in the most desperate circumstances, a summons for help that transcended all boundaries of territory and family. The response was immediate and overwhelming. From every direction, the thundering of hooves and paws began to converge on the village. Victor's pilot was right. Every animal within miles was responding to Thunderwalker's call, drawn by the same mysterious force that had united natural enemies around baby Zara. "Sir?" Chen's voice was tight with worry. "I'm reading massive animal movement from all compass points. Whatever's happening down there, it's bigger than just those elephants." Victor's jaw tightened as he realized his carefully planned operation was encountering something unprecedented. But he had come too far to turn back now. Too much money was at stake, too much reputation was on the line. "Begin the assault," he ordered coldly. "Target the lead bull first." The first tranquilizer dart fired from the helicopter struck Thunderwalker in the shoulder, but the massive elephant didn't even flinch. His protective rage was so intense that the chemical designed to drop a normal elephant in minutes seemed to have no effect on him at all. Baby Zara felt Thunderwalker's pain through some connection that science couldn't explain. She placed her tiny hand on his massive foot and looked up at him with worried eyes. "Big doggy hurt?" she asked with genuine concern. "Zara make better?" Her touch seemed to give Thunderwalker strength beyond anything the tranquilizers could take away. He trumpeted his defiance to the helicopters above, and his call was answered by the arrival of the most extraordinary army in natural history. The first to arrive were the zebras, dozens of them, their stripes creating a dizzying pattern as they galloped toward the village in perfect formation. Behind them came wildebeest, their horned heads lowered for battle. From the forest emerged leopards and cheetahs, natural enemies who now moved side by side toward a common goal. Even the sky began to darken as every bird within miles took flight, creating a living storm cloud that swirled around the helicopters. Eagles and vultures, hawks and tiny finches, all united in their determination to protect the small human who had somehow become the center of their world. Victor watched this impossible gathering through his binoculars, his face pale with disbelief. "This isn't natural," he whispered. "Animals don't behave like this. There's something supernatural happening here." His mercenaries, hardened men who had seen combat on 3 continents, found themselves facing something beyond their training or experience. How do you fight an entire ecosystem that has turned against you? In the second helicopter, the team leader spoke nervously into his headset. "Sir, recommend we abort mission. We're looking at potentially thousands of hostile animals, and they seem to be coordinating their movements. This is beyond our operational parameters." But Victor's greed had evolved into obsession. The ivory from just one of those elephants would pay for this entire operation 10 times over. He couldn't accept that a baby and a bunch of animals could defeat modern technology and trained soldiers. "Negative," he snarled. "We finish this job. Switch to lethal rounds if necessary." That command was the final straw for several of his team members. The mercenaries had signed up to steal from animals, not to massacre innocent creatures and potentially harm a human child. One by one, voices began to crackle over the radio with refusals to continue. "I won't shoot into a formation with a baby in it," declared the gunner in the second helicopter. "This whole operation has gone insane," added the pilot. "Count me out." Victor found himself in the same position as Rashid had been, a leader whose subordinates were abandoning him in the face of something they couldn't understand or fight against. On the ground, the animal army had formed a protective perimeter around the entire village that stretched for hundreds of yards in every direction. At the center of it all, baby Zara sat peacefully in Thunderwalker's shadow, completely unaware that she had become the focal point of the most unusual war in African history. Sarah, watching this impossible scene unfold, made a decision that would change her life forever. Instead of trying to control the situation through conventional law enforcement, she chose to trust in the same force that had united all these creatures. She walked slowly toward the center of the animal formation, her hands raised peacefully, her rifle secured on her back. The animals parted to let her pass, zebras stepping aside, leopards lowering their heads in acknowledgement, elephants trumpeting soft greetings. When she reached baby Zara, Sarah knelt down and looked into the child's innocent eyes. What she saw there was something beyond human understanding, a purity of spirit that connected to every living thing, a love so complete that it transformed everything it touched. "Hello, little one," Sarah whispered. "I think you've started something amazing here." Zara smiled her radiant baby smile and reached out to touch Sarah's face with the same gentle gesture she had used on the reformed Poachers. "Nice lady," she said simply. "Help save big doggies?" In that moment, Sarah understood what she needed to do. She pulled out her radio and spoke with absolute authority that surprised even herself. "Control, this is Unit 7. I need you to contact the International Wildlife Protection Agency immediately. Tell them we have a situation that requires their highest level of intervention. And patch me through to the media, all of them. The world needs to see what's happening here." Above them, Victor's helicopters circled like mechanical vultures, but their prey was no longer defenseless. The baby, who had started the day playing with colored stones, had somehow assembled the most powerful army in nature, not through force or fear, but through the simple power of innocent love. The real battle was just beginning, but for the first time since the helicopters had appeared, the people and animals of Kitemba village believed they might actually win.